This might be one of the most broken all-around characters I've ever seen, by the way. I have never seen anything like this. This is insane.
In the history of League of Legends, it's quite rare to see a champion have a sustained win rate of nearly 60% for an entire patch. There was the updated Skarner in the Juggernaut patch, where he dominated the jungle with a 63% win rate. And there was Galio in patch 7.21, where he cosplayed as the best one-punch mid laner with a 62% win rate. Balancing a game with so many different champions is not an easy task, and Riot Games gives their best effort when updating League of Legends. However, mistakes happen, and outliers are bound to be inevitable, often due to a major upgrade in a champion's kit. When win rates become highly inflated, the balance team is usually able to apply a moderate hotfix patch to try and get the champion's new kit properly tuned. But how has Maokai, a champion that seemingly has a very modest set of abilities, suddenly amassed such a huge spike in win rate despite having no champion-specific patch update in nearly 6 months? In this video, I'll be going over several reasons as to why Maokai support is so absurdly strong to start Season 14 and what the patch 14.3 nerfs are hoping to fix. With the removal of mythic items in Season 14, most champions received an overall decrease in power level. There is no longer a singular overpowered item to work towards, and instead, all champions now have a lot more flexibility to choose legendary items based on the given game state. Maokai, however, was decently strong in Season 13 without even buying a mythic item. Therefore, removing mythic items from the game has had little to no negative impact on Maokai. More specifically, Maokai's most popular build in Season 13 involved rushing a Deadman's Plate. This is because movement speed is such an important stat to acquire for Maokai, even more so than your typical mythic item. In Season 14, a newer, cheaper support version of Deadman's Plate was introduced called Trailblazer, which again is another small buff to Maokai's build path. The only difference really between Deadman's Plate and Trailblazer is a slight decrease in tankiness and the removal of some damage. As a support, however, Maokai really only needs the movement speed buff, and being able to acquire this type of passive 400 gold earlier is absolutely fantastic for Maokai support. In just the second patch of Season 14, this guy decided it would be a good idea to introduce a 2% movement speed buff to the game.
The intended tuning here is meant to be niche.
Are you serious? Unlike the other rune stat shards like health, it's difficult to acquire movement speed outside of purchasing a pair of boots. You can really only get additional movement speed on Maokai by stacking winged moon plates, which isn't super accessible. By giving Maokai even just 2% movement speed makes him a roaming monster where he can easily catch up and CC key targets. Unlike most tank engaged supports, Maokai's threat range is very limited. Compare the hook range of these common tank engaged supports. It's pretty obvious to tell that Blitzcrank, Nautilus, Thresh, and Leona all have engage ranges that nearly double Maokai's short W range. Any ranged support player will tell you that Maokai support is just so easy to bully in lane compared to any of these other tank supports, since Maokai can only engage if you're poorly mispositioned. Maokai's W is just so unthreatening that he really needs the extra movement speed to make his W an actual threat of an ability. Maokai needs to close the gap by a few hundred units before ever engaging with his basic ability. Long story short, 2% movement speed is simply worth a lot more on Maokai compared to any other tank engage support in the game. Adding to the discussion of tank engage supports, Maokai is the only one out of these tank supports that has a spammable ability that actually provides a lot of utility, his sapling toss. There really isn't a bad time to throw a sapling into an unwarded bush. Leona isn't going to be pressing W for fun, Nautilus isn't going to be pressing E for fun, but Maokai has no problem pressing E for fun and make it useful. With the additional mana provided from World Atlas, you've essentially given Maokai a stat that he can more easily utilize compared to most other engaged tank supports. Saplings are probably the most OP ability for Maokai support, despite being the ability you max last. More specifically, with the new map changes, being able to control these 3 bot bushes is a key advantage to winning the game. It's still so insane to me that I can get vision control of the river bush from all the way over here as a red side support player. It is without a doubt that bot lane is probably the easiest lane to gank in Season 14 due to several gank angles the jungler can take. There are really only a few supports in the game that can have as much vision control as Maokai support. Usually you can only place 1 ward in the early game with your trinket, yet Maokai circumvents this obstacle by simply throwing down an extra sapling. You can now save 75 gold by delaying the purchase of an early pink ward while providing similar vision control as a regular support. Similarly, during objective takes like Void Grubs, Dragon, or Baron, Maokai can continually spam saplings with the 75% mana regeneration provided by his fully upgraded support item. It can be so frustrating for the enemy to advance their vision if they keep running into your pesky saplings. Saplings truly are a vision hack for Maokai support players, and I hate to say this as a Maokai main, but it really does feel like I'm cheating when I'm playing this champion. I just never get punished for improper ward placement or ward timing since I have a backpack full of saplings at my disposal. Although Maokai is definitely the strongest support in the current meta, he does have clear weaknesses, most notably being a weak to average laner. As mentioned many times already, his threat range isn't very large, meaning he can be poked out easily in lane. He's also not as tanky as Leona or Nautilus, making his turret diving ability a bit more risky. Simply put, laning with Maokai often relies on poor misplays from the enemy bot duo, more so than a crazy max range hook engage from a Thresh or Blitzcrank. You really do lack agency as a Maokai support when it comes to laning. Instead, Maokai excels as a support not by staying in the bot lane, but instead by spending more time roaming around the map. He works much better by fighting in the jungle where he can abuse his saplings for superior vision control. Now you may be wondering, isn't laning super important? If you tend to always roam, won't your bot laner fall too far behind? Why is Maokai not being punished for perma-roaming? Well, here comes my most controversial take of this video. Due to the insane amount of burst introduced in Season 14, bot laners are just such a weak class.
God damn it. Okay, I'm queuing support though. I'm done playing fucking AD. This role is too fucking useless.
Now, a fed bot laner can still dominate the game, but I've played in too many games where this did happen, yet it still somehow ends in a loss. After getting my bot lane super far ahead, more often than expected, he simply ends up being a huge sack of gold that can be easily bursted and given to a more useful position in the mid game. You invest so much into your bot laner by dominating lane and providing him tons of kill gold, yet unfortunately, one misstep means he gives his entire bounty away. Unlike in pro play, in solo queue, it can be just too difficult to perfectly protect and peel for your ADC. In my opinion, Season 14 has started with just way too much burst, making immobile ADCs without self-peel much too difficult to play. There's just too much burst. Giving gold to more independent characters with some sort of self-peel or mobility is just a safer and better investment. I know this sounds like a broken record, but League of Legends really does largely feel like it's decided by one primary role: jungle diff. As a Maokai support, whenever the meta is dictated to be played around your jungle, this means it's a meta that's heavily in your favor. Alright then, knowing all this information, how does Riot plan to lower Maokai support's win rate so that it's in a more acceptable range? In patch 14.3, Maokai's base mana regeneration is reduced by 17%, and level 1 E is now 33% more expensive to use. Both these mana cost nerfs are significant. It essentially means Maokai has to use a bit more brainpower as to when throwing a sapling is actually useful. Previously, you really weren't punished by spamming saplings even in random locations, since it only cost 45 mana. Having sapling toss be 15 mana more expensive at level 1 should mean one less silly sapling toss every minute or so, which is a fair nerf. Now, this doesn't mean you should stop using saplings. Please still throw your saplings in unwarded bushes and around objective teamfights. However, you will now be punished for throwing saplings that don't really provide any information. Additionally, the cooldown reduction increasing from 14 to 16 seconds means you will have to wait an additional 2 seconds to toss a sapling in the next bush when advancing vision in the mid to late game. Overall, you just gotta be a little bit more patient and a little bit more thoughtful when pressing E. If you've gotten this far in the video, I'd like to let you guys know that Maokai is actually intended for other roles besides support.
What do you mean? What do you mean?
The passive nerf that Riot has introduced has nerfed healing specifically on Maokai support rather than top or jungle, because it now more heavily scales with total HP. Riot has now adjusted Maokai's passive healing to skew more in favor of Maokais who actually purchase health. Since the support role generally means you won't have as much gold as a top or jungler, you therefore will not be able to buy as much health as a typical hardstyle Maokai top laner. If you look at the table here, as long as you have this much total health at each level, it's actually a buff for Maokai players. Unfortunately, I don't really see many scenarios where Maokai's health could possibly be this high other than at levels 4, 5, 8, 10, and 12. Interestingly, Maokai received a buff to his Q, which now costs 20 less mana. This buff is meant to help Maokai top and jungle since it's an important ability for him to spam to help with wave clear and killing camps. This Q buff may actually further enhance the unique Senna Maokai bot lane combo since Maokai would be the one who wants to farm. Lastly, Maokai's ultimate at rank 1 is 10 seconds longer, making teamfights a bit more scarier. Having his engage take 10 seconds longer to refresh is not a nerf to be overlooked. This essentially means that the availability of your second ultimate is now 20 seconds longer, third ultimate is 30 seconds longer, so on and so forth. This R nerf really only does have an effect in the mid game when Maokai support is between levels 6 and 10. By the time he reaches level 11, you can go back to using Nature's Grasp like nothing has changed. As of this recording, Maokai support in 14.3 has only slightly decreased in win rate, and I wouldn't be surprised if more nerfs are coming in later patches. I really hope the one stat that Riot doesn't touch is his movement speed, because that would really kill the identity of Maokai support. Even after these nerfs, I do think Maokai support is still a very viable champion that simply requires a bit more patience and thoughtfulness when throwing his saplings. Thank you so much for watching this Maokai support analysis video. If you like this content, make sure to hit that like button and consider hitting that subscribe button too. It really does help. If you have any additional thoughts about patch 14.3 for Maokai support, please let me know in the comments below.